The challenge we have in South African education is that maths is not being taught correctly. Often maths is taught by an unqualified person. There are sections that are not taught, and maths needs building blocks continuously to grow in terms of maths, that cognitive growth. So what we find is we have students coming to us with massive gaps where maths hasn't been taught properly. We integrate it into daily tasks. We get them to understand that AI is not copy and paste. How do I use the tool properly? How can that tool be used to assist me in learning? For teachers, they get to use it in creating different types of lessons. So STEM is 100% correct. We have to drive that. But there's a massive part that we're leaving out, and that is business and entrepreneurship.
Hello and welcome to ITWeb TV with me, Sibahle Malinga. Today we'll be talking about the importance of STEM-focused schools in eradicating some of the fragments in South Africa's education system, both in the public and the private sector. Now, we know too well that South Africa's education system faces significant challenges, including socio-economic inequalities, inadequate infrastructure, a shortage of teachers, which are exacerbated by limited access to technology and resources, leading to a low number of pupils taking up careers in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, better known as STEM. So today I'm joined by Shaun Fuchs, who is the founder and CEO of Centennial Schools, and that's a school that combines technology with real-world skills in preparing learners for the future of work in the digital economy. Shaun, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me as a guest.
It's a great pleasure to have you. So let's just start off by getting an understanding of what is Centennial Schools and what distinguishes your educational approach from the traditional schooling system.
So I understood that on my 35 years of education background, that nothing had changed. It was the same thing. And during COVID and lockdown, I'd had the idea of starting my own school, but I wasn't sure what to do. And what I did know as a history teacher, because that's what I was initially trained as, is that after major world events, things change. So the example of World War II, September 1939, and September 1945, the world was completely different from 1939. Politics, geography, business, so many things had changed. And we had exactly the same thing in January 2020 and in January 2022. And when you kind of arrived in January 2022, so much had changed. How we socialized, how we shopped, how we did business, working remotely. So that much had changed. But what didn't change was education and schools. So they went straight back to doing what they were doing in January 2020 and had the perfect opportunity to change. So for me, the idea of creating Centennial Schools was about creating a school where we actually were future-proofing our students for post-Matric and actually having them ready for jobs that currently didn't or that wouldn't exist.
Wow. So this was in the year 2022?
2021 and opened in 2022.
So let's talk about, some of the technologies we find in your school and just describe the education model that you've put in place and what is so fascinating with Centennial Schools.
So I think Centennial Schools is a disruptor, and it's a disruptor in a very sensitive market because it's education. So we have parents that have gone through schooling system and it worked for me, didn't it? So it will work for my kid. Actually, no, it won't. And we're too hesitant to disrupt a market of education. It's this mammoth ship that has to be turned. And so for me, disrupting education, particularly in South Africa, was a no-brainer, and the easiest way to disrupt it was using technology and using technology correctly. We saw how technology was accelerated during COVID and lockdown. People never knew what a Zoom meeting was. Suddenly everyone was on Zoom meetings. So by using technology, we were able to start disrupting education. What I understood was that if we wanted to change how education was delivered, we needed to first of all change the pedagogy. In other words, how we taught, that teaching methodology. In order to change the teaching methodology, you have to change the physical space. So we designed learning hubs, very large spaces, comfortably accommodate 30 to 40 students. The learning hub was dynamic and mobile. Desks within seconds could arrange into groups of 3, 4, 2, into one large big collaborative circle. Students had the option to stand at a higher desk as opposed to sitting at a lower desk facing one direction the whole time. There was tiered seating for students who accelerated their learning and worked ahead of the others. They could go sit there and be given additional work. So the whole classroom as we traditionally know it was completely changed, as opposed to just using technology and putting a laptop or an iPad in front of a student and saying, okay, now we're advancing your education. So our physical space changed and the way we taught started changing.
Well, from the way you're talking, it sounds as if you really are, preparing learners for the future of work and to be part of the digital economy. I spoke in my intro about South Africa's education system facing significant challenges. And of course, these include socioeconomic inequalities, inadequate infrastructure. There's a shortage of teachers, and it's all really exacerbated by the limited access to technology and resources, all leading to a lower number of pupils taking up careers in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so it sounds as if the design of your school is really to accommodate an uptake in STEM skills. Tell us about how you do this. Is it compulsory for pupils to take up STEM skills? And how do you even encourage enthusiasm in those skills?
So I want to move away slightly from STEM, because traditionally schools will argue we are driving STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, as very strong levers within our education system.
That's not what the numbers are saying, though. If we're seeing a decline every year of the number of matriculants that have enrolled for science and mathematics, that tells a different story. But let me allow you to take.
It does tell a different story, and I think there's a slight tail to what I'm going to say. So STEM is 100% correct. We have to drive that. But there's a massive part that we're leaving out, and that is business and entrepreneurship. So at Centennial Schools, we have 3 clear pillars: science and maths, technology, and business and entrepreneurship. Now, for me, there's a thread that runs with those 3 pillars continuously throughout the school. So in science, we push the science at a level where your top achievers, because not everyone does science, but we push those levels strongly. Before you can do that, you've got to get it right in maths. And that's the biggest challenge we have in this country.
From what grade?
Right from the beginning. We only started grade 6. That's largely because our building, our space will only allow us to do that. So the space we have, the space we found, only allows us to start at grade 6. The challenge we have in South African education is that maths is not being taught correctly. Often maths is taught by an unqualified person. There are sections that are not taught, and maths needs building blocks continuously to grow in terms of maths, that cognitive growth. So what we find is we have students coming to us with massive gaps where maths hasn't been taught properly. Particularly in the primary schools and the early foundation phase. So what we have to do is try and plug those gaps and correct it. So in fact, when we have maths at Centennial Schools in our middle school, which is grade 7, 8, and 9, the maths class is literally halved. and 2 teachers are allocated to 1 maths class. So now in a traditional space, I've got 1 maths class, 1 teacher teaching 25 or 30 students. With us, we've halved that. We've also put the students with their ability. So your students who are getting your 70 or 75 to 90% averages, they are being taught together because the teacher can now gear the average of 80% and really push those kids. The students, like I wasn't a mathematician at school, certainly, so I would be sitting in the 40 to 50% bracket. But at least the maths lessons are geared towards my ability, and the aim is to take me from a 40 to a 45 to a 50 to a 55, and so grow my maths. So that for me is absolutely critical, because we get the maths right, you'll get the science right, you'll get the coding right, you'll get the technology right. So there's so many things where maths is a critical form. The cop-out, though, is getting to grade 10, we give the kids maths literacy, which is completely different to core maths. We have to
Because
get
they're
that
struggling.
right.
So how then do you talk about all the fragments that, school pupils experience even before they get to high school level? How do you ensure not just enthusiasm, but even when scholars do take up these subjects, that they continuously do well and that they excel at them, and that, it's something that they really are keen in taking up even beyond the phase of high school?
It's a process. So that process that process needs to obviously start as early as possible. So, for example, how you teach mathematics is so important. We've gamified a lot of our teaching. What I mean by that, you do subtraction with kids. There's a game that they can do on their laptop, Snakes and Ladders, addition and subtraction. And it's so simple. There are so many games, and kids love playing games. But now with them being able to play a game, you've gamified a section of mathematics, and the kids are actually enjoying it, and they're scoring. And typically of this generation, they want to score enough points so they can get to the next level. And they are going to make sure they get to the next level. Now, what is the difference between doing that and just getting a normal addition and subtraction on a workbook? So we gamify a lot of our lessons in order to drive the motivation of the students and also to change that learning.
And of course, a key part of having students that are learning and efficiently doing so is having teachers who are efficient. And we know that experts have always said that even in some schools within, whether it's public or private sector, where education and technologies are being introduced, we see that sometimes teachers are actually grappling with imparting their knowledge because teachers themselves are digitally illiterate. So how do you equip your teachers in order to empower them with the right skills to impart that knowledge to the pupils?
That was such an important question, because it was one of the biggest challenges that I had. Because when I put together Centennial Schools, it was different, radically different, in particular how we taught that pedagogy. And so it was critical to headhunt the right type of teacher that understands technology is there to accelerate education. And often you will find that what do we do when we're confronted with something new? We step back and we become a little bit more conservative, or we go back to what we knew. So with the teachers, it was constantly professional development, getting them to learn, getting them to understand what it was about. I spent the first 2 years teaching myself. So I was back in the classroom, I was teaching. What was in my head had to be translated on the ground in the learning hub. And so teachers couldn't turn around and say, it doesn't work. No, it can. I've just shown you it can work. Or we had to adapt and readjust certain things because it wasn't working as efficiently. So it was continuous training that needed to take place. And teachers are prepared to learn. They've just got to get over that kind of fear of the unknown and often technology.
Mm. Mm. So we saw in the Matric results released in January, there was quite a huge decline in the numbers of pupils that enrolled for maths as well as science. And this has really been consistent over the years. I mentioned this earlier. What do you think the real reason behind this is? And what can the schooling system, even outside of the private schooling system, let's look at the public sector, for instance. Yes, they've got limited financial resources, limited resources. What do you think the key is? You have touched on this, but also just looking beyond the private sector.
The tragedy is that within our public system of education, and I might need to be corrected, but if I remember correctly, we have one of the highest per capita allocation of fees for education in the budget. And the problem is we are not allowing that money to be spent correctly. That's one of the biggest problems. So within your state system, you need to completely reimagine how we're educating. Now, technology is available because most students today in South Africa, I think the last statistic was something like 45 million smartphones in South Africa alone. Now, most people have a smartphone. There is so much information I can glean as research, as a resource from my smartphone. Yes, I need the connectivity, and I'm sure there's a lot of public-private partnerships that could come into that. There already are. I know there are a number of fiber companies that are giving free access to schools. So I do think that there is certainly a solution, but at the moment, we don't have a solution, and we are going to continue to see the struggle of kids exiting a system that is antiquated, exiting a system that qualifies them to do absolutely nothing. That matric certificate qualifies you to do what? Nothing.
Maybe be a teller at
That's
ShopRite and pick
But it
up
doesn't even qualify you with that. All it does is say, okay, you've done X, Y, and Z. It allows you access into a university. Many companies say you need a matric certificate in order to get a job, but there's no skill set behind it. And that's what we started doing at Centennial Schools. We started looking at what skills can we give our students that when they exit, whether they go to university or entrepreneurs start their own business or whatever they're doing, they still have a skill set that they're actually capable of doing something other than a certificate that doesn't qualify them to do anything.
Mm. And speaking of a certificate that is worthy, we're seeing AI, taking the business world by storm. In fact, all areas of our lives have been overtaken by AI, and it really continues to play a central role in various industries, in our lifestyles, at home. Are we preparing students to keep up with these technological advancements?
At Centennial Schools, 100%. Absolutely, we are. We integrate it into daily tasks. We get them to understand that AI is not copy and paste. How do I use the tool properly? How can that tool be used to assist me in learning? For teachers, they get to use it in creating different types of lessons.
Can you give us a case study here of how AI is implemented in the learning environment?
So if I'm asking students to do research, traditionally what students would do is they would go onto Google and they would research a particular topic. So what I can do now is I can give them a particular scenario and I can ask them to set different, ask AI to present different scenarios on that topic. We started the year in grade 10 where our teachers provided a maths problem. They divided the students into groups. They then asked them to access different AI models. So each group had a different AI model, and they then had to get back to the source of the mathematical problem using artificial intelligence. And of course, depending on the model and depending on how they ask and what they did, students, the majority got back to the source correct, but for the majority of them, they understood that AI wasn't a one set model. It's not going to give you one specific answer. And they actually had to navigate that and work through that. So it was an incredible exercise that they started at the beginning of the year.
Wow. At what's the earliest stage at which they incorporate AI, and what are these tools? Are we talking about ChatGPT?
Yeah. So I mean, there's so many. There's Gemini, there's ChatGPT. I mean, ChatGPT is very popular, isn't it? I mean, there's what's a DeepSeek, which
Yes,
is kind of
DeepSeek
sprung
is
onto the
taken.
market. I'm not 100% convinced after using things like OpenAI's platforms. But I think what's also important is to get students to understand in history. As a teacher, I teach there's more than one source. As a journalist, you go to several sources and you
Yes,
eventually
you have to
determine
verify your
exactly.
sources.
And that's the same thing with AI. Don't just use one source. So we try and get the students to use as much as possible. Copilot in Microsoft is a very powerful tool, and we're a Microsoft school, so we use the Microsoft applications on our tech
From
devices.
as early as grade 6?
Absolutely, from grade 6, yes.
And so another thing that I actually wanted to find out from you is your matric pass rate. How does that look?
Because the school's new, we have our first matric group this year.
Ah,
And the pass rate doesn't worry me.
what is
Uh,
the target?
It, of course, 100% pass. I mean, you can't fail matric. It's
Mm.
honestly, you should not be
Not with
failing
not
matric.
with all the support and all the resources you've
Absolutely.
provided.
The only way a student's going to fail matric is if there's some level of emotional or sort of mental wellness that is a critical issue. That's the only reason. All the other tools are there. That it doesn't worry me about the matric pass rate, and you're not going to see Centennial posting on front of the media. I was going to say newspapers, but I haven't read a newspaper in years. But not putting our results out for everyone to see, because those results for me are still flawed. So a school that publishes results, we got 4 distinctions per matric. When you actually drill down, the majority of students who got those 4 distinctions actually got 8 or 9 or 10 distinctions, not the average of 4. It's a marketing gimmick. It's a marketing tool. We're not going to get caught up in that. We're giving authentic education. We're going to make sure that when our kids leave, they are prepared for those 85% of jobs that right now do not exist. That is more critical than actually a numbers game and a marketing tool. But am I confident our students will do well? Absolutely, they'll do very well. It's our first matric group, and our students will continue to do well at Centennial Schools with a strong digital edge and ready for the new economy.
Mm. Shaun, there's an important question. Listening to how you're talking, you clearly have a wealth of experience in this area. So an important question that I left out, which we really need to ask you, is just to get a brief overview of your professional background and how your journey has led you to this current position.
Sure. So, I mean, I always wanted to be a teacher from when I was a kid. I knew that when I was at school in my matric year, I understood it. I had some aspiration of being a lawyer. Thank goodness I didn't go into that at all. Nothing wrong with the legal profession, but for me, teaching was where I needed to be. And qualified, taught history as a subject, which I, to this day, absolutely love. Sports coach, water polo, rugby. I'd coached at national level for water polo. So really enjoyed education, certainly in the 90s and into the early noughties. And then I moved more into management. I was the headmaster or principal at Crawford College, Loanhill for a number of years. And then moved into the corporate side with Advitech as general manager of Crawford Schools, and then across to the opposition with Inspired Schools, which owns the Redham House brand, and I took over that as managing director for 4 years. And then I published a book, I think telling a good story and a more memoir. And then COVID hit and lockdown and the world changed. And I just realized it was time to really do what my 35 years of education had led me to this point, and founded Centennial Schools.
Wow. And it's amazing when you mention the COVID hitting. I remember writing stories about how schools were grappling to go online, universities were grappling to go online, because this is really something that they were not prepared for. They were caught off guard, and so it's interesting, and it's a good thing that you are already in that direction. Is hybrid something that you do, hybrid learning, or are you um, are you a physical school that incorporates a whole lot of technologies?
So physical school that incorporates technology. One of those is an element of hybrid. So, and it's a very good question, because I think there can be a balance. So our work is always prepared at least 8 weeks in advance. So you as a student in grade 8 can go, what am I doing in Mr. Fuchs's history class? Period 3, 2 weeks time, I can click on it and the entire lesson's there. The introduction, the concept, the PowerPoint, the sources, everything that I use as a teacher is there for my students. And that's prepared a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks in advance. Now, what does that mean? It means that if a family has to go, because life has changed post 2022, the family can go away and the student has access to the work and they can work. So it's not online learning, but there is a form of hybrid learning. So students can go through the notes, they can get everything, they can access it, speak to their teachers via Teams or email. So it's something that certainly I think schools could adopt and could really be a lot more effective.
Well, I know that at the moment you have one branch which is based in Centennial, but I do know that there is also an expansion plan in the pipeline. Tell us about this.
So when I opened Centennial Schools, I think I was quite I was really bullish in the sense that it couldn't be one school, because I knew that this was the school that our students needed, that was a model that was going to prepare our students for what education is not delivering, and hence opening it as Centennial Schools. So our current school we call Centennial School Santon, based in Sunninghill, and that's the first school. We are currently looking at properties in the Western Cape. We have a huge demand for opening a campus in Cape Town itself in particular. That in itself has challenges. As we know, the property market in Cape Town is literally euro-based or dollar-based. So what you pay for a property in Gauteng, you're going to pay 3-4 times that in the Western Cape. That affects fees, etc. So we are still looking, and it is certainly a challenge to find the right property. We have a very strong social media accounts. We have something like 200,000 followers on TikTok, and our most asked question is, when are you coming to Cape Town? On those social channels. So we know there's definitely a market for that. We also know that internationally, we certainly would be looking at locations like in Dubai. Last year, gaming and esports is a huge component of our school under the technology pillar, and our Minecraft team beat their competitors in South Africa, then Africa, and we were then invited to take part in the esports festival in Dubai. So we flew across, courtesy of Dubai Tourism, and we competed against the top schools in Dubai in Minecraft, and our team won. So
Overall winner
wow, in Minecraft in Dubai, and that was incredible. And what I saw there, it highlighted what Centennial Schools was about, and there were many parents of local parents in Dubai who were asking, is the school going to open in Dubai? So I certainly feel that there is a model that can open internationally and in a location like Dubai. So that certainly would be down the line something that we would strongly consider.
Wow, interesting. And any timelines for the Cape Town opening?
As soon as we find the right property, it'll be there. My hope was as soon as next year. That's not going to happen. Hopefully within 2027 or 2028. And of course, as you know, you can open a school in January or January. You can't, it's not like retail where you can open a school any time of the year. So you're limited to opening in the beginning of a year. And there's a huge amount of work that takes place before that to open the school. So 2027, 2028 probably sounds more realistic.
Wow. Sounds like you've got big plans in the pipeline, and we do wish you all the best.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to hear that you've got a huge following on TikTok and the social media. Hopefully our video will go viral once again. But thank you so much, Shaun, and we do wish you all the best. And thank you for the incredible work that you're doing, because you are obviously resolving a whole lot of issues that, stem up within our society. This is not just about learning and school. It's about, the children that you are building through your schooling system. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me as a guest.
Thank you so much. Well, that was Shaun Fuchs, CEO and founder of Centennial Schools, talking to us about the education system in South Africa, as well as the approach and model taken by Centennial Schools, and what distinguishes it from what we find in the country. Remember to follow us, like, and subscribe. From me, Sibahle Malinga. Adios.